The rain hit her face like needles, and the last thing she saw before her knees buckled was the iron gate rising impossibly high into the storm. Genevieve Lawson had been walking for 3 days. She'd left her car broken down somewhere in the mountains, her phone long dead, her jacket soaked through 2 days ago. The fever had started that morning, a slow burn that turned her legs to water and her thoughts to fog. When the fortress appeared through the trees, all black stone and impossible angles, she thought it was a hallucination. But the gate was real. The walls were real. And then the ground rose up to meet her, and the cold rain kept falling, and the darkness finally won. She didn't see the figure that appeared on the other side of the gate. Kazimir Morath stood perfectly still in the downpour, watching the woman crumpled on the wet stone. Rain plastered his white hair to his skull, darkened his black coat, but he didn't move, didn't blink. For 500 years, the law had been absolute. No human passed these gates, no mortal foot inside these walls. He'd written it himself in blood and iron on the night he built this place, when humans had hunted his kind with fire and faith, and he'd decided to stop running and start ruling. The woman didn't move. The rain kept falling. He should leave her there, let nature take its course. She'd chosen to walk into these mountains, chosen to ignore the stories the locals told, chosen to collapse at the one door in the world that would never open for her kind. Her hand twitched, just slightly, fingers curling in a puddle. Kazimir looked back at the fortress, every window dark, his court asleep in the hours before dawn. No one would know, but he would know. He'd built everything on law, on order, on the promises he made and kept. A king was nothing without his word. The woman's breathing changed, shallower, faster. "Damn," Kazimir said softly. Then he opened the gate. The iron shrieked as it moved, the sound swallowed immediately by thunder. He crossed the threshold, knelt in the rain, and gathered her into his arms. She was burning up, fever hot even through wet clothes, and she weighed nothing at all. Human, fragile, dying probably if he left her out here. He carried her inside and closed the gate behind them both. The sound of that gate closing echoed through 5 centuries of silence. Inside, the fortress was all stone corridors and vaulted ceilings, lit by gas lamps that burned with a steady blue flame. Kazimir moved quickly through the entrance hall, up 2 flights of stairs, past the gallery where portraits of dead kings watched with disapproving eyes. He brought her to the east wing, the rooms he'd kept for guests he never invited, and shouldered open a door into a chamber that hadn't been used since the fortress was built. He laid her on the bed, stepped back, looked at her properly for the first time, young, maybe mid-20s. Dark hair stuck to pale skin, jeans and a torn sweater, and hiking boots that had walked their last mile. Pretty, in the way humans were pretty, all warmth and mortality and temporary bloom. She was shaking, even unconscious, her body fighting a battle it was losing. Kazimir stood there for a long moment, wondering what he'd done. Then he went to find dry clothes and firewood, and whatever else it took to keep a dying human alive. By the time the sun rose, the room was warm. The woman was dressed in clean clothes that hung loose on her frame, and Kazimir was sitting in a chair by the door, watching her breathe. She hadn't woken, hadn't stirred except to shake. He'd checked her temperature with the back of his hand, human method, and decided she needed a doctor but couldn't have one. Not without questions, not without breaking the secret he'd kept for half a millennium. So he sat and waited, and broke another rule by staying in the room with her at all. At noon, she made a sound, a small, confused noise in the back of her throat. Her eyes moved beneath their lids. Kazimir didn't move from his chair. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the light from the window. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, breathing. Then her head turned, and she saw him, and her whole body went tense. "Easy," Kazimir said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He hadn't spoken to a human in 500 years. "You're safe." She stared at him. Her eyes were gray, he noticed, storm-colored, wide with confusion and fear and fever bright. "Where?" she started, then coughed. Her voice was wrecked. "Where am I?" "My home." She pushed herself up on one elbow, winced, looked down at herself. At the clean shirt and blankets and bandages on her hands, he didn't remember wrapping. "You brought me inside. You were dying outside." I don't remember. She stopped, closed her eyes. The gate. I remember the gate. You collapsed, and you brought me in. She opened her eyes again, focused on him with an intensity that surprised him. Why? Good question. Kazimir stood from the chair. She flinched and he froze, realizing how he must look. White hair, white skin, black clothes, standing in a room full of shadows like something out of the stories she'd probably heard as a child. Because you were dying, he said simply. But you don't let people in. This place, everyone in the village talks about it. The fortress in the mountains that's been here forever. The place no one enters. So she had been in the village. She'd heard the stories. She'd come here anyway. Kazimir felt something like curiosity stir under his ribs. Why were you at my gate? I was lost. My car broke down on the mountain road 3 days ago. I've been walking. I thought this was a monastery or something, somewhere I could call for help. No phones here. I see that now. She looked around the room, taking in the stone walls, the ancient tapestries, the way everything looked like it hadn't changed in centuries because it hadn't. This is really your home? Yes. And you live here alone? No. Her eyes snapped back to him. Who else is here? My court, my people. He paused, chose his words carefully. We're private. We don't welcome outsiders. Then why did you welcome me? I didn't. I made an exception. She studied him for a long moment, and Kazimir had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen. Really seen. You don't look like a hermit, she said finally. You look like something else. He almost smiled. What do I look like? Something old. Something that shouldn't be here. Now he did smile, just barely. Perceptive. I'm a historian. I notice things. She coughed again, harder this time, and Kazimir moved without thinking. He crossed to the bedside table, poured water from a pitcher into a glass, handed it to her. She took it slowly, watching his hand. His very white hand, pale as bone, cold as death. She drank anyway, set the glass down. Thank you. You need rest. I need to leave. I'm sure I'm breaking 50 rules just being here. You're breaking one rule, the only one that mattered, and I already broke it for you. Kazimir moved back to the door. Rest. We'll discuss your departure when you're well enough to walk. Wait, she said. What's your name? He hesitated. Names had power. Names could be used. But she was human and weak and trapped in his fortress, and he'd already broken every rule that mattered. Kazimir. Genevieve. Rest, Genevieve. He left before she could ask anything else. Outside the room, he found Lucien Devereaux waiting in the corridor. Lucien was his second, his oldest friend, and currently looked like he wanted to commit murder. Tell me I'm hallucinating, Lucien said. Tell me there isn't a human woman in the East Wing. You're not hallucinating. Kazimir, what have you done? Saved a life. You've broken the founding law, your law, the law that's kept us safe for 500 years. She was dying. Humans die. That's what they do. That's what makes them human. Lucien's voice was low and urgent. You can't keep her here. The court will lose their minds. The court answers to me. The court respects you because you keep your word. What do you think happens when they find out you broke the one law that defines us? Kazimir leaned against the wall, suddenly tired. He didn't need sleep, hadn't in 5 centuries, but there was a weight on him now that felt like exhaustion. I don't know. Then think. Please, before this becomes something we can't control. She's sick. She needs time to recover, then she'll leave. And forget everything she saw here? She hasn't seen anything, just an old fortress and a strange man who gave her shelter. Lucien shook his head. You're lying to yourself. She's already asking questions. I can hear her heart racing from here. She knows something's wrong. She knows nothing. She knows enough to be afraid. Kazimir pushed off the wall. I'll handle it. Will you? Lucien caught his arm. Or will you do what you always do when something threatens this place? Will you kill her before she becomes a problem? The words hung in the air between them. Kazimir looked at Lucien's hand on his arm, then at his face. No. No. No, I won't kill her. Then what will you do? I don't know yet. But I made a choice when I brought her inside. I don't unmake choices. Lucien released his arm. The court convenes at dusk. They'll smell her by then. Human blood, human heartbeat, human warmth in a place that hasn't held any of those things in 500 years. You'll have to tell them. I know. And they'll demand answers you don't have. I know that too. Lucian sighed. You're a fool, old friend. Probably. But you're my fool. I'll stand with you when they start shouting. Appreciated. Lucian left and Kazimir stood alone in the corridor, listening to the sound of Genevieve's heartbeat through the door. Steady now. Stronger. She was fighting off the fever. She was surviving. He'd made the right choice. He had to believe that. At dusk, the court assembled in the great hall. 30 vampires, all of them older than most nations, all of them bound to Kazimir by blood and loyalty, and 5 centuries of keeping the same rules. They stood in a circle around the central floor, silent and watchful, and Kazimir knew the moment they realized what he'd done. Seraphine Valois was the first to speak. She was old, older than Kazimir by a century, and she'd been with him since the beginning. There's a human in the East Wing. Yes. The silence that followed was absolute. Then everyone started talking at once, shouting, some of them, demanding explanations, demanding justice, demanding the human be removed immediately or killed or both. Kazimir let them rage. He stood in the center of the circle and waited for the fury to burn itself out. When it finally did, when the last voice fell silent, he spoke. I found her dying at our gate. I brought her inside. She's recovering. When she's well, she'll leave. You broke the law, Seraphine said, not shouting, just stating a fact. I did. The law you made. The law we've all kept. Yes. Why? It was the same question Genevieve had asked. Kazimir still didn't have a good answer. Because she was dying. And nothing. That's the reason. Another vampire stepped forward. Nikolai Corvinus, young by their standards, barely 300. Ambitious, dangerous. That's not good enough. It's the only reason I have. Then you've failed us. You've compromised everything we built here. For what? For one human who doesn't matter? She matters to me. The words came out before Kazimir knew he was going to say them. The court went silent again. Even Nikolai looked surprised. You don't know her, Lucian said quietly from the edge of the circle. I know she was dying, and I could stop it. That was enough. That's weakness, Nikolai said. That's the thinking that got our kind slaughtered, caring about human life, putting them before our own survival. Our survival isn't threatened by one sick woman. Our security is. Our secret. Everything we've protected. She doesn't know what we are. She will. She's not blind. She'll see, she'll learn, and then what? We let her go with the knowledge that a fortress full of vampires lives in these mountains? We'll handle that when it comes. You'll handle it now. Nikolai's voice was hard. According to our law, the law you wrote, a human who learns our nature must be turned or killed, no exceptions. She hasn't learned our nature. She will, and when she does, the law is clear. Kazimir felt his temper stir, the old anger that had made him dangerous 500 years ago. I wrote that law. I can interpret it. You can't ignore it. I'm not ignoring it. Then what are you doing? Seraphine asked. Kazimir, I'm asking honestly. What's your plan? He didn't have one. He'd acted on instinct in the rain, and now he was paying for it in front of his entire court. But he wouldn't back down, wouldn't send Genevieve out to die, wouldn't kill her to satisfy Nikolai's paranoia. She recovers, Kazimir said carefully. She regains her strength. We keep her isolated from the court, give her no reason to suspect what we are. When she's well, we escort her to the village, provide her with transportation, and send her on her way. She'll remember an eccentric household that gave her shelter, nothing more. You're gambling our security on her ignorance, Nikolai said. I'm giving her a chance to live. And if she talks, if she brings back questions, investigators, hunters, she won't. You can't know that. I can, and I will. Kazimir looked around the circle, meeting every eye. I brought her here. She's my responsibility. I'll handle the consequences. There's a better solution, Nikolai said. Invoke the law. Turn her or kill her. Make it official. No. You're refusing to follow your own law? I'm refusing to murder an innocent woman. Then turn her. Make her one of us. Problem solved. The suggestion hit Kazimir like a physical blow. turning was intimate, sacred, irrevocable. He'd turned only 3 vampires in his entire existence, and each time it had been a choice made together, carefully, with full knowledge and consent. The idea of forcing it on Genevieve while she lay sick and trapped in his fortress was obscene. "No," he said again. Nikolai's expression hardened. "Then you're betraying everything we stand for." "I'm protecting a life. That's what we stand for. We stand for survival. For our kind above all others. That's the law, that's the promise. The law can bend. Not this law, not the one you wrote in blood when we lost everything to human fear and human violence. You swore we'd never be vulnerable again. You swore no human would ever have power over us, and now you're handing that power to a stranger because she collapsed at your gate?" "Enough." Kazimir's voice cracked through the hall like a whip. "I've made my decision. The human stays until she's well. She leaves when she's able. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Am I clear?" Silence. "Am I clear?" One by one, they nodded, even Nikolai, though his eyes promised this wasn't over. The court dissolved, vampires drifting away into the shadows, and Kazimir stood alone in the great hall with Lucian beside him. "That could have gone worse," Lucian said. "Could it have? Nikolai could have challenged you directly." "He's thinking about it." "Yes, he is." Lucian turned to face him. "And when he does, you'll have to choose between the girl and everything you've built here. It won't come to that. It already has. You just don't want to see it." Lucian put a hand on his shoulder. "I hope she's worth it, old friend." So did Kazimir. He returned to the East Wing an hour later, carrying a tray of human food he'd remembered how to prepare from 5 centuries ago. Bread, cheese, soup made from ingredients he'd had to search 3 pantries to find. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Genevieve was awake when he entered. She was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had that morning, and she watched him cross the room with those gray eyes that saw too much. "You brought food," she said. "You need to eat." "Thank you." She took the tray, set it on her lap, looked down at the soup. "This smells amazing. It's been a while since I cooked for anyone." "You live in a fortress full of people and you don't cook? They don't eat this kind of food." She looked up sharply. "What kind of food do they eat?" Kazimir realized his mistake immediately. "Different diets, medical reasons." "All of them?" "It's a condition that runs in the family." She studied him for a long moment, then took a spoonful of soup. Swallowed. "This is really good. Thank you. You're avoiding my questions. You're asking dangerous questions." "Am I?" She set down the spoon. "Kazimir, what is this place? Really? I told you, my home. A home where everyone has a medical condition that changes what they eat, where the windows are all covered, where everything's stone and shadow and feels like it's from another time. Where you," she gestured at him, "where you look like that." "Like what?" "Like you've never seen the sun, like you're carved out of marble, like you're not quite real." He should leave, should walk out and lock the door and keep her isolated until she was well enough to go. But he stayed, because she was looking at him like she wanted answers, and he was so tired of the lies. "I'm real," he said quietly. "Then what are you?" "Hungry." It was the truth in a way. He hadn't fed in days, too preoccupied with keeping Genevieve alive to think about his own needs. And now, standing in a small room with a human whose heartbeat was growing stronger by the hour, he could feel the hunger stirring. Not urgent, not dangerous, but there. Genevieve must have seen something in his expression because she went very still. "You're not human." It wasn't a question. "No." "Are the others?" "No." She absorbed this, didn't panic, didn't scream, just sat there with her soup cooling on the tray and her eyes locked on his. "What are you?" "Old." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now." "Why?" "Because once I tell you the truth, everything changes. You can't unknow it, you can't unhear it, and there are rules about humans who know what we are." "Bad rules?" "Terminal rules." She went pale. "You're saying if you tell me, you'll have to kill me. I'm saying the law demands it. I'm also saying I won't follow that law." "Why not?" "Because I didn't bring you inside to kill you. I brought you inside to save you." Even though it breaks your rules. Even though. She looked at the tray, then back at him. You're a vampire. Kazimir froze. What? You're a vampire, all of you. That's why no one enters. That's why the stories say this place is cursed. That's why you look like that, and move like that, and talk about laws written in blood. She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. Am I right? He could lie, could laugh it off. Could compel her, use the old power to make her forget. But she'd figured it out on her own with nothing but observation and logic, and he found he didn't want to insult her intelligence. Yes, she nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? I'm a historian. I study myths and legends and the stories people tell to explain the unexplainable. I've spent my whole career looking for evidence that the old stories might be true. And now I'm sitting in a vampire's fortress being told that everything I've researched actually exists. She picked up the spoon again. So yes, okay. Kazimir stared at her. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, but I'm also fascinated, and you said you're not going to kill me. I'm not. Then I'll choose fascinated over terrified and see what happens. He couldn't help it. He laughed. It was a rusty sound, unused for decades, and it startled them both. You're remarkable. I'm a disaster with terrible survival instincts. If I had good sense, I'd be screaming. Most humans would be. Well, I'm not most humans. I'm the one who walked into the mountains alone and collapsed at a vampire's gate, so clearly I make questionable choices. She ate another spoonful of soup. Is the law really that I have to die now? The law says you have to be turned or killed, but I wrote that law, and I'm choosing to ignore it. What happens when your court finds out I know? They already know you're here. They don't know you've figured out what we are. Will they kill me if they find out? They'll demand it. I'll refuse. And then? And then we'll find out if 500 years of loyalty is enough to override 500 years of fear. Genevieve set down the spoon again. I don't want to cause problems for you. You already have. Might as well see it through. That's a terrible plan. Do you have a better one? Not really, no. They looked at each other across the dim room, and Kazimir felt something shift. Some balance tipping from duty into something else. She was smart and brave and absurd, and she was looking at him like he was interesting instead of terrifying, and he didn't remember the last time anyone had done that. Finish your soup, he said. You need your strength. For what? For whatever comes next. She smiled, just a little. Comforting. I'm not good at comfort. You've done all right so far. He left before he could do something foolish like stay. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended peace. Kazimir visited Genevieve twice a day, bringing food and books from the library and conversation that came easier each time. She recovered quickly, the fever breaking on the second day, her strength returning by the third. She asked questions about the fortress, about his life, about what it meant to be a vampire, and he answered what he could without giving away too much. She told him about her work, her research, the way she'd always felt drawn to the old stories. She talked about her family, her childhood, the life she'd built studying the past. She was funny and sharp and completely unafraid now that the initial shock had passed, and Kazimir found himself looking forward to their conversations in a way he hadn't anticipated. On the fourth night, she asked if she could leave the room. I've been staring at these walls for days, she said. I'm going insane. Can I at least walk the corridors? Kazimir hesitated. The court was growing restless. Nikolai had been asking questions, pushing boundaries, testing how far he could go before Kazimir pushed back. Letting Genevieve roam the fortress was a risk, but keeping her locked up felt like cruelty. Stay in the east wing, he said finally. Don't go past the main staircase, and if you see anyone else, return to your room immediately. Will they hurt me? Not while I'm alive, but they might say things you don't want to hear. I'm a big girl. I can handle rude vampires. These aren't rude vampires. They're ancient predators who see you as either food or threat. Don't mistake civility for safety. She sobered. I understand. Do you? Yes. I'll be careful. He left her with that warning, hoping it would be enough. It wasn't. He was in the library that evening when he heard the shouting. 2 voices, one male, one female, echoing down the stone corridors. He was moving before he'd fully processed the sound, running in a way vampires didn't usually need to run, and he reached the east wing to find Genevieve backed against a wall with Nikolai in front of her. "What are you doing?" Kazimir's voice was cold enough to frost stone. Nikolai didn't turn. "Introducing myself to our guest." "Step away from her." "Why? She's just a human. You said so yourself." "Step away, now." Nikolai finally turned, and his smile was all edges. "We were just talking, weren't we, Genevieve?" Genevieve said nothing. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady on Kazimir. "She knows," Nikolai said conversationally. "I can smell it on her. The knowledge, the fear. She knows what we are, and you let her live. You're not just breaking the law, Kazimir. You're making a mockery of it. This is not your concern. It's every vampire's concern when their king decides human life matters more than vampire security. I'm warning you one last time. Step away from her." "Or what? You'll fight me? You'll kill me for speaking the truth?" "If I have to." The threat hung in the air. Nikolai's smile faded. "You've changed, old friend. Time was, you'd have killed her yourself the moment she learned our secret. Now you're threatening your own court to protect her. What happened to the king who put our survival above everything? He learned that survival without mercy isn't worth the cost. Mercy is weakness." "Then I'm weak." Nikolai shook his head. "You're a fool, and you're going to get us all killed." He left, brushing past Kazimir with enough force to make a point. Kazimir waited until his footsteps faded, then turned to Genevieve. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared. He didn't touch me. He just talked. Said a lot of things about how you're making a mistake, how I should be dead already, how the law is absolute." She pushed off the wall, wrapped her arms around herself. "Is he right?" "About what?" "About the law, about me being a mistake." "No. You sound very sure." "I am." "Why?" Because he was starting to care. Because every conversation made her more real, more important, more impossible to imagine gone. Because he'd spent 500 years building walls, and she'd walked through them like they were made of smoke. "Because I don't make mistakes," he said instead. She almost smiled. "That's very vampire of you." "Is it?" Arrogant and absolute and completely unconvincing. Now he did smile. "You're feeling better." "I am, thank you. For everything. For saving me, for keeping me safe, for not killing me when I figured out your secret." "You're welcome. And for the record, I don't think you're weak. I think you're the strongest person I've ever met. It takes more strength to show mercy than to follow a cruel law." The words landed somewhere deep in his chest, warm and unexpected. Kazimir didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "I should go back to my room," Genevieve said, "before anyone else decides to have a chat." "I'll walk with you." They moved through the corridors side by side, not touching, but close enough that he could hear her heartbeat, steady and strong. At her door, she paused. "Kazimir." "Yes?" "What happens now? I'm better. I can leave. But if I do, what happens to you? Will your court forgive you for breaking the law?" "That's not your concern." "It is, if you're in danger because of me." "I've been in danger for 500 years. I'll manage." She reached out, touched his arm. Just briefly. Just long enough for him to feel the warmth of her hand through his sleeve. "Thank you." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her, and Kazimir stood in the corridor, wondering when he'd started hoping she'd stay. The answer came 2 days later, when the court convened again, and Nikolai invoked the right of correction. Kazimir had known it was coming. The right was ancient law, older than the fortress, a tool created to check a king's power when he strayed from the founding principles. It required a formal challenge, a trial before the full court, and a binding vote. If 2/3 of the court agreed the king had violated the core law, he had 3 choices: reverse his decision, face exile, or face death. Nikolai invoked it publicly, in the great hall, with the entire court assembled. "You've broken the founding law," Nikolai said. "You've allowed a human to learn our nature and refused to enforce the consequences. By the right of correction, I demand you either execute the human, turn her with her consent, or step down as king." The court erupted. Half of them shouting support for Nikolai, half of them shouting for order, all of them looking at Kazimir like he was a stranger. He let the chaos build, then raised a hand. Silence fell immediately. "The right is invoked," he said calmly. "I accept the challenge. We'll hold the trial tomorrow at sunset. Until then, this court is dismissed." He walked out before anyone could argue. Lucian caught up with him in the corridor. "You can't let this go to trial. You know how it ends." "I know. 2/3 will vote against you. Nikolai's been building support for weeks. You'll be forced to kill her or lose everything." "I won't kill her." "Then you'll lose the court. 500 years, Kazimir, everything we've built, gone because you couldn't let one human die." Kazimir stopped walking. "Do you think I should kill her?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. "No, I think you should have let her die in the rain, but you didn't. And now we're here. So what do I do?" "You do what you always do. You rewrite the rules. The right doesn't allow that. Then you break the right. That would mean civil war. Better civil war than losing who you are." Kazimir looked at his oldest friend and saw the truth in his eyes. Lucian didn't care about the law or the court or even survival. He cared about Kazimir, about the vampire who'd built this place on honor and now had to choose between honor and everything else. "I need to talk to her," Kazimir said. "What will you say?" "I don't know yet." He found Genevieve in her room, reading one of the books he'd brought her. She looked up when he entered, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "There's a trial tomorrow. About you. About whether I should be forced to kill you or give up my position as king." She stood slowly. "Because of me. Because of my choice. There's a difference. Not to your court. No, not to them." He crossed to the window, looked out at the mountains beyond. "There's a way out of this, an option they're not giving me, but one that exists." "What is it?" "I could turn you, make you one of us. If you consent, the law is satisfied. You'd be vampire, not human, and the court would have to accept it." Genevieve was quiet. When he turned back, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "I want you to live." "That's not what I asked." "I don't know what I want." The honesty surprised him. "I brought you here to save your life. I broke every rule I made to do it, and now I'm standing here asking you to give up your humanity so I can keep my crown. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's the only solution I have." "What if I say no?" "Then I step down. I give up the court, the fortress, everything, and you walk out of here free." "And then what? You lose 500 years of work? Everyone here loses their home?" "That's my consequence to bear, not yours." She crossed the room to stand in front of him. "You'd really give it all up? For me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I've spent 500 years protecting laws, and I forgot to protect the reason laws exist. Because you walked into my life dying, and I carried you inside, and I don't regret it. Because—" He stopped, caught by the way she was looking at him. "Because you matter." Genevieve reached up, touched his face. Her hand was warm against his cold skin, and he went very still. "I fell in love with you," she said softly. "Somewhere between the soup and the books and the way you look at me like I'm something worth saving. I fell in love with a vampire king who broke every rule to keep me alive. And now you're asking me if I want to spend forever with you." She smiled. "The answer is yes. You understand what you're giving up? Sunlight, aging, your human life, everything? I understand I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing forever in a fortress with a man who showed me more kindness in 4 days than most people show in a lifetime. So yes, Kazimir, turn me, make me yours. Let's see what happens next." He kissed her. He didn't plan it, didn't think it through, just leaned down and pressed his lips to hers and felt her kiss him back. It was gentle and desperate and tasted like goodbye to everything she was and hello to everything she'd become. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "When?" she asked. "After the trial. Let Nikolai have his moment. Then I'll show him how a king rewrites the rules." The trial was a spectacle. The court assembled in the great hall, every vampire in the fortress present, all of them watching as Nikolai made his case. He spoke about the law, about survival, about the necessity of maintaining boundaries between vampire and human. He spoke about Kazimir's betrayal, his weakness, his failure to uphold the principles that had kept them safe. When he finished, the court murmured agreement. Kazimir could see the votes already counted, 2/3, easily. Nikolai had won. Then it was Kazimir's turn. He stood in the center of the hall, looked around at the faces he'd known for centuries, and spoke. Nikolai is right. I broke the law. I brought a human inside, knowing the consequences, and I refused to kill her when she learned what we are. I did all of this deliberately, fully aware of what it meant. He paused. And I would do it again. The court erupted. Shouting, accusations, demands for justice. Kazimir waited them out. You invoke the right of correction, demanding I execute the human or step down, but the right assumes the king has acted against the core principles. I haven't. I've acted in perfect accordance with who we are. You've broken the law, Nikolai said. I wrote the law, and I'm rewriting it now. Kazimir's voice cut through the chaos. The founding law states no human may enter this fortress. That law was made 500 years ago when humans were hunting us, when trust was death and mercy was suicide. But times have changed. The humans don't hunt us anymore. They don't even believe we exist, and we've spent 5 centuries hiding in fear of a threat that no longer exists. The threat is always there, Seraphine said quietly. Perhaps, but so is the opportunity. Genevieve Lawson is a historian. She studies the old stories. She came to these mountains looking for truth, and she found it. And instead of running, instead of screaming, she chose understanding. She chose to see us as more than monsters. He looked around the hall. She reminds me that we are more than monsters, that survival isn't just about walls and laws and keeping the world out, it's about choosing who we want to be. So you're choosing her over us, Nikolai said. I'm choosing both. The law was meant to protect us. I'm updating it to reflect the world we live in now. The founding law is hereby amended. Humans who learn our nature may be granted sanctuary, provided they pose no threat and the king deems it safe. The law still protects us, but it no longer requires us to be cruel. You can't just change the law, Nikolai said. I wrote it. I can change it. That's what it means to be king. Kazimir's voice was iron, was free. The vote before you isn't whether I've broken the law. It's whether you trust me to lead. If 2/3 of this court votes against me, I'll step down. I'll leave this fortress, and you can elect Nikolai or whoever you want. But if I remain king, the law changes. Genevieve Lawson will be turned with her consent, and she will be one of us. And any of you who have a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Silence. Then Lucian stepped forward. I vote to keep the king, and I support the new law. Seraphine sighed. As do I. The world has changed. We should change with it. One by one, the court voted. Some for Kazimir, some against. When the count was finished, the result was clear. 3/4 in favor. The king remained. Nikolai looked like he'd swallowed poison. This isn't over. Yes, Kazimir said quietly. It is. You invoked the right. The court has spoken. If you can't accept that, you're welcome to leave. You've destroyed everything we built. I've saved it. You just don't see it yet. Nikolai left without another word. A few others followed him, but most stayed, and when the hall cleared, Kazimir stood alone with Lucian and Seraphine. That was risky, Seraphine said. It was necessary. The girl really means that much to you? She does, Seraphine smiled. Then turn her, make her family. It's been too long since this place felt like a home. She left, and Lucian clapped him on the shoulder. You're still a fool, but you're a fool who kept his court. That's something. Thanks. Will she be happy here? Human turned vampire, living in a fortress full of ancient predators? I'll spend eternity making sure she is. Then I wish you luck, old friend. You're going to need it. Kazimir returned to the east wing to find Genevieve waiting. She was dressed and ready, and she looked at him with those gray eyes full of trust and hope and love. The court voted, he said. And? I'm still king. The law has changed. And if you're still willing, I'll turn you tonight. She smiled. I'm willing. He took her to his private chambers, a place no one else in the fortress had ever entered. The room was sparse, functional, untouched for centuries. but tonight it would witness something new. It will hurt, he warned. The venom burns, and then you'll die just for a moment before you come back. I'm not afraid. You should be. I trust you. He kissed her then, one last time as she was human, warm and alive and perfect. Then he moved to her throat, felt her pulse under his lips and bit. The turning took 3 days. Genevieve lay in his bed, her body burning with venom, her human life draining away. Kazimir stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand, speaking to her even though she couldn't hear. He told her about the world she'd wake up to, about the strength and speed and hunger, about the way colors would sharpen and sounds would amplify, and everything would feel both familiar and completely new. On the 3rd day, she opened her eyes. They were red now, bright with new hunger, and when she sat up, she moved with a grace that was entirely vampire. Kazimir, I'm here. She looked down at her hands, pale as bone, looked at the window where the sun was just setting. It worked. It did. I'm vampire. Yes. Forever. Forever. She turned to him and her smile was radiant. Good. He kissed her and it was different now. She was strong enough not to break, fast enough to match him, cold enough that they fit together perfectly. And when they broke apart, she laughed. This is amazing. Everything's so loud and bright and alive. How do you stand it? You get used to it. And the hunger? We'll handle that. There are ways to feed without killing. I'll teach you. What about the sun? We avoid it, but moonlight is just as beautiful. She stood, tested her new strength by lifting a chair with one hand. I could get used to this. I hope you do. You'll be dealing with it for a long time. Forever, she said again, and came back to him. With you. With me. Are you happy that I chose this? He pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. I'm happier than I've been in 500 years. Then it was worth it, all of it. The rain, the fever, the near-death experience, the angry vampires. All of it led here. You're a romantic. I'm a vampire in love with a king. I'm allowed to be romantic. He laughed, and the sound echoed through the chamber. Yes. Yes, you are. They stayed like that for a long time, 2 vampires in an ancient fortress, holding each other as the sun set and the moon rose, and the world outside continued without them. A week later, Kazimir stood at the gates of the fortress and did something he hadn't done in 500 years. He opened them. The iron shrieked as it moved, protesting centuries of disuse, but it opened, wide, letting the moonlight stream in, letting the world see inside. Genevieve stood beside him, her hand in his. Are you sure about this? No, but you were right. Survival without connection isn't living, it's just existing. I'm tired of existing. What will you do? Slowly, carefully, let the world know we're here. Not monsters, not threats, just people who happen to live forever. That's ambitious. I have time. We have time. She squeezed his hand. Forever. Forever. They stood in the open gate, looking out at the mountains and the valley beyond, and Kazimir felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Hope for the future, for the fortress, for the strange, impossible love that had started with a woman dying in the rain and a king who couldn't walk away. Behind them, the court gathered, Lucian and Seraphine and all the others who'd chosen to stay. They looked at the open gate, at the world beyond, and slowly, one by one, they stepped forward. Into the moonlight, into the possibility, into whatever came next. The fortress in the mountains, the place no human had entered in 500 years, was finally opening its doors. And it started because a vampire king broke every rule to bring one woman inside. Because sometimes the right choice is the one that breaks everything, and sometimes breaking everything is how you finally start to build something real. Kazimir looked at Genevieve, at her white hair and white skin and red eyes that still held all the warmth of the human she'd been. No regrets? Not one. Even though I turned your life upside down? You didn't turn it upside down. You turned it into something extraordinary. She leaned up, kissed him softly. I love you, Kazimir Morath, king of vampires, breaker of rules, the man who saved my life and then made it infinite. I love you, Genevieve Lawson, historian, survivor, the woman who saw a monster and chose to see a man instead. They walked through the open gate together, hand in hand, into the night that would never end and the forever they'd chosen together. And behind them, the fortress stood tall against the mountains, its gates finally open, its walls no longer a prison, but a home that started with a woman fainting in the cold rain and a vampire king who broke every rule to bring her inside.